All right, we are live on there. Thanks for tuning into the show today. Today we're joined by Jake Eisenhauer, who, man, I've honestly, Jake, I've been excited to do this podcast. Moved back in town, 2-3 months ago ish, or
about 2 months ago.
About 2 months ago, and honestly, it's been a long time since I've seen you. Probably same for a lot of people around town here.
Yeah.
And your story, like we were just talking, I've got kind of an outline here that I put together in a topic, and but your story from A to B probably isn't going to be a straight line that gets us, from where you started to where you're at now. But I think that's what makes your story so, unique and worth talking about. So I mean, when you tell your story, where's chapter 1 in your book? Where do you start? Or what you want to start with a little bit of your background, or what's the best place to kind of let people know why we're doing this podcast and who you are and your story?
Okay. So I'll start out just a little bit into like where I just came from, what I was doing, and then we can get back to like the true start of it. So obviously I just moved back here from Prescott, Arizona. While out in Prescott, I worked for 2 drug treatment facilities. The second being the second largest drug treatment facility in the state of Arizona. We had close to 128 on-campus clients, and I was the assistant director of operations there. I went out there. I got that job because simply I was a drug addict for about 11 years of my life. And today I sit here a very confident human being, confident in what I can bring to the table at all times. But it wasn't always that way. So the start of the story really starts in early childhood. If you talk to drug addicts and alcoholics about their early childhood, the vast majority will tell you that they've never felt like they were a normal kid. And I will tell you that right now.
You had that feeling?
I had that feeling.
Do you know, was there an age, like a point where you can be like, yep, I remember when I was a freshman in high school, or when I was a fifth grader, or is it more just a broad, I just felt like that when I was younger? It
was really like earliest childhood memories when I was around people that weren't like family. I just felt like I wasn't existent there. Like I was the type of person that could feel lonely in a group of people. And I suffered from this social anxiety at all times. I didn't know what to say to people. I was worried about what you would say back to me. I was worried about how you felt about me. And nothing that I could do would change that. So you look at me as this little kid, and most people on the outside would be like, oh, he's just a shy little kid. And to me, I was struggling deeply with learning how to interact with people in a like positive way and not worrying about how they were going to interact back. And early on, I will tell you that the first time I ever felt normal in my life was when my dad put a football in my hands. I can remember recess in elementary school at Haskins, just having the time of my life. Not a worry in the world, but as soon as recess ended and I went back into the classroom.
And you started thinking again.
Exactly. So sports became this outlet for me at a young age that it made me feel normal for once. And then you take it away from me, and I'm back to that shy, little, anxious kid. And so when I found that, I latched onto it. And growing up in a small town like Pratt, sports are everything. So it was something that like really came to me easy. And having 2 older brothers that were decent athletes really helped me out to a certain extent. And I will say that the true like mental health aspect of everything really started to come out in my like 4th, 5th, 6th grade years of school.
That early, really?
That early, and it was just. I'll say this. I can remember going to Friday night football games and Judd playing.
Pull that just a little closer to you. You're good.
And Judd playing football, and having older adults come up to me and be like, "Hey, we can't wait until you're in high school. You're going to be just as good as Judd." And to me, like, that meant something more than it meant to them. To them, they thought that they were talking me up and that they were giving me confidence and they were doing something positive. And 100% they were. But for a socially anxious little kid that couldn't even talk to kids his age, to have an adult say, "Hey, we can't wait till you get to that age because you're going to be so good." I was having expectations put on my life that I didn't know how to deal with. And it starts really small. And unfortunately for me, I didn't know what to do at that time. I continued to play the sports. But unfortunately for me, I get all the way through middle school and I haven't hit puberty yet. And all the kids around me have. So the one thing in my life that like made me feel normal, I'm no longer that good at. And so I go through this phase of like childhood depression of like, I have all these expectations about like what I can become. But in my life, there's nothing that is pointing towards that. So we get to my freshman year of high school, and I'm not even starting on our freshman football team. And I see these same older people everywhere in town. We live in a small town.
Right.
And I'm thinking in my head that they're looking at me like I'm a failure. Are they? No, not at all. But in my head, I have these expectations that were put on me, and I'm thinking, what is my life going to be? And then finally, towards the start of my sophomore year, I hit puberty. I turned from nothing to something pretty quick. I end up starting at corner and quarterback for the varsity football team my sophomore year due to injuries. And my high school football career kind of takes off from there. And people all of a sudden want to talk to me. And I still haven't dealt with that social anxiety. And, you know, I was a good kid. My parents raised me not to drink alcohol, not to smoke weed, not to do anything like that. So I didn't go out to parties. I didn't do anything like that. And we get to this point where we're going into my junior year, and people think that I'm going to be something pretty special. And I end up doing pretty well. And about the sixth game of my junior year, I go up to knock down a pass on defense, and I land on my wrist, and I broke it. And we didn't know at the time that it was broken, and run off the field, and we're looking at it, and the question is asked to me, and nothing against the coaches because we don't know what this is.
Right.
They give me the option, can you play or not? And I'm 16 years old, 17 years old. You give me that option, this is my life. I'm taking it every time.
And back in that day of high school football, you seeing the way, Judd grew up, that type of football, and, that was, you played.
You played all the time. And so I end up playing the rest of the year, and I have my first reconstructive wrist surgery at the end of my junior year of football. And they go in, they tie some ligaments back together, do a bunch of work, and I am prescribed an opiate coming out of this surgery. And like I said, I wasn't one to drink alcohol or smoke weed. I had experimented just like most kids at that age, and neither one of them really did anything that I liked. And then all of a sudden I get handed this prescription painkiller. And I can tell you the feeling that I got the first time that I took it. I was sitting, I had to go to school. I'm sitting in my first hour of class, fresh out of surgery, and all of a sudden, like, I notice that all that social anxiety that I'd had my whole life, it wasn't there. For the first time in my life, I felt normal in a setting that wasn't on a football field or a basketball court. And as soon as I felt that, it was just this relief.
And it was that, and the first time you did them, it was that noticeable.
The first time. And it was just, when I felt that, just like when I was a little kid with the football, I latched onto it. And it was something that I felt like I needed to make sure that I was okay off the field. And we go through my junior year, and, you know, I did really good in track, set a school record, where everything is looking up at this point in my life. And we're going into my senior year, and the first game of my senior year, I ran a bootleg. Middle linebacker got my wrist as I was running past him and did it all again. Hurt it again, came off, went back in, played all 11 games, and I'm taking every snap into this messed up wrist, and it's swelling up after every game. And I never took anything on the field. That wasn't the goal. The goal was, like, I wanted to play ball. I wanted to play with my best friends. And at that point in time, in 2006, we didn't know what the opiate epidemic was. We didn't understand what could happen with these painkillers. And we had my second wrist surgery at the end of my senior year. I'm getting recruited to play small college football, nothing big. I'm going on recruiting visits. But to that point in my life, my only goal in life was to play college football. That's all I ever wanted to do. Nobody ever really talked to me about what happens after football's over.
Right. That's a realization that a lot of high school kids struggle to deal with.
Yes.
You know,
I don't think, I really don't think that, especially with athletes, we talk to them enough about, like, if it was taken away from you today, what's your plan B? Where are you going with this?
right. And you see that a lot in the pros. You know, you'll see, I mean, you don't think at the high school level that it's that big a deal. It's like, oh, everybody plays high school sports, only 1-2% maybe go play even small college ball, you know, and everybody gets over. But man, I remember, but it was that feeling of your last high school football game. You'll never forget it. Nope. You know, and you've played football your whole life. That's your goal as a kid, is to play, you know, greenback football. Yeah. And then that senior season rolls around, you get 9 games, maybe a few more if you're lucky, and get into the playoffs. But man, once that final game's over, it's like, what do I do now? Like, this is what I've done my whole life.
And that was, you know, I grew up in the Anderson era.
Right.
Where Pratt High was just this powerhouse. And the goal for every young kid at those Friday night games was to be out there. And that was from early childhood on. That's all I ever wanted to do. I wanted to strap that greenback helmet on, and I wanted to go battle with my best friends and win games for the town of Pratt, and, like, just have that glory that all those previous greenback players had. So we get into this time period where I'm getting recruited, but yet I'm having these surgeries. And after the second surgery is when things really started to go downhill. I started to notice that when I didn't have the painkillers, I was getting sick. It felt like I had the flu at all times. And I didn't feel normal. I didn't feel like I could do anything. And I didn't have anybody to really talk to about it other than my parents, who are the most supportive people ever. But hearing it from somebody else would have meant a lot more than hearing it from them.
Was there somebody that would have been effective, or could have given you a message at that age, at that time in your life, that would have been effective and be like, you know what, you're right, I need to turn my shit around, or this is serious, or were you just kind of far enough into the rabbit hole that the course was already set?
I feel like there could have been people that could have talked to me. Now, to say that it would have affected me, I don't know, because I was 18 years old.
Right.
I thought I was on top of the world. You know that feeling whenever you grow up in a small town where you're this great athlete and everybody like holds you up on this pedestal of like, he's awesome. You almost get this ego about you. Like, best, but you're 18 years old. You don't know anything.
Right.
If I could go back and talk to 18-year-old Jake and say, hey, like, if you don't change something now, the next 11 years of your life is going to be a struggle.
Do you think 18-year-old Jake would have listened?
I don't know. Because at that point, I thought I knew everything.
Right.
And I didn't know anything.
Right.
So we get to that, and I went on a recruiting visit to Sterling, one to Highland Community College, and I'm having these coaches talk to me about playing ball and saying, once we get your wrist healthy, and then all of a sudden going into senior year of track, we're in the old high school gym playing wiffle ball and Lifetime Sports. And I get tripped at a full sprint going around first. I had just been released to do actual practices a week prior, and I go in with my right wrist in that wall, and I tore it up really, really bad. I knew immediately what it was, and it took us, probably 14 or 15 doctor visits before we found a doctor that would even work on it. They were just the ulna side of your wrist is really delicate, and I'd already had 2 major surgeries on it. And we finally found a guy in Wichita that said, "Hey, I'll work on it, but we're gonna put your arm in a cast for 6 weeks and see if it does anything to it first, and then we'll schedule a surgery if we need to." So at that point, I'm dating a young woman who decided to go to KU. So I make a decision. I'm going to take a semester off of football. I'm not going to sign anywhere. And I'm going to follow her to KU and have this last surgery and then go play ball afterwards. And we get to that. The last surgery happened November 7th, 2007. And we go in, and they figured out that the reason why I kept on having all these issues was my ulna bone in my arm was half an inch too long. So where your ulna bone stops, mine goes another half inch, and it's just impacting these wrist bones at all times. So he decides he's going to go into my arm, cut out a full inch of it, bring it back up, put a 6-inch steel plate in it, and the whole point behind the surgery is so that I can play college ball. We come out of that surgery, and he sat me and my dad down, and he said, "Listen, I got some good news and I got some bad news for you." And I said, "Well, what's the good news?" He said, "Well, I don't think you'll ever have an issue with your wrist again." And I said, "Okay, what's the bad news?" And he said, "Jake, I'm the doctor that did your last surgery, and I'm never going to release you to play football again." I'm 19 years old at that time. And for the first 19 years of my life, until that day, all I ever wanted to do was play college football. That was my identity. And when he told me that, I lost who I was. And the only thing that I had left, the only part of my identity that I had left was the person that I was when I was on the opiates. And so I went into this really deep depression. I ended up transferring back to PCC on a track scholarship. I'm there for 5 semesters. I fail classes every semester. Never ran a single track meet. Never did anything. And it was, everything that I had ever worked for at that point, I threw down the drain. But to me, I was still this person that I wanted to be while I was on the pills. So I thought life was fine. I thought that I was doing everything. I was a normal 20, 21-year-old. And going into about 3 weeks prior to my 21st birthday, I overdosed for the first time. And I can remember coming to and having a conversation with my parents about I needed help. I needed help to stop using. And they said, okay, we'll get you help. And they sent me to Norton Valley Hope. And I was there for 27 days. Went in the day after my 21st birthday. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't go to get sober. I went to make sure that like I never overdosed again. I had the tools and the skills to make sure that that never happened again, that I could manage my life still. And it didn't work. I came back to Pratt. I was at PCC within probably days of me being back. I was back on the pills. But during that time, my oldest brother, Judd, moved back into town. And he kind of took me under his wing. And Judd's 6 years older than me. So growing up, I didn't really get to experience being his brother. I was always his little brother. So I got to really hang out with him, and he taught me a lot about life. And at the end of that year, I was eventually kicked out of school for failing. And he sat me down and he said, listen, you need to get out of here. Pratt's going to do nothing for you. And he talked me into moving to Louisiana with my girlfriend at the time. And everything's looking up when I get to Louisiana. I've got a job. I'm showing up to it every day. I'm on a maintenance program through a mental health place where they're providing me this opiate blocker so I don't take any pills, and everything is going really, really good. And then October 5th, 2010, I received a phone call from my father at about 7 a.m. And he actually called my girlfriend because he didn't think I'd be awake. And she came over and gave me the phone. And I can remember, I can still hear his words. He said, Jake, Juddy died last night. And my brother was my hero. Everything I ever wanted to be in life was because of him. And my world fell apart really quick. I don't remember the plane ride home because within 20 minutes of receiving that phone call, I went and picked up because I didn't know how to deal with emotions. And that week was a struggle for the family. And it'll live in me the rest of my life, but it really set me up for this just downhill trend in my life. Judd was the one person that I knew that I could go to and talk to about anything. And when I lost him, I lost that go-to. So I go back to Louisiana after his funeral, and I'm there for another 11 months. And then finally I decide that it's time to go back to Pratt, get back into school. I'm using still, but I did come back, and I eventually graduated from PCC with my associates in social work. I showed up to school, and I did what I was supposed to do. But after that, I decided that I was going to go to Pitt State and finish out my degree. And when I got to Pitt State, I just threw away everything. I didn't go to class, didn't do anything. I was in this depression because I didn't know anyone. That social anxiety was there. And unfortunately, I got kicked out of there, and I moved back. And my parents told me that I needed to get help again. So I went to Mountain Ridge Valley Hope in 2014, and they helped me for 27 days again. And everything was looking really, really good. And then within a week of me leaving, I'm living at an Oxford house in Andover, Kansas, and somebody really, really close to me passed away of an overdose. And when she passed away, once again, I couldn't deal with the emotions.
You started the cycle again.
And got kicked out of that sober house immediately within a week and a half, and moved back to Pratt, and moved in with my parents. And I started doing odd jobs. I worked multiple places, but then I started coaching young kids in football and baseball. And when I was around those kids, what I realized was I didn't need to be high. They accepted me for who I was. They accepted me for the knowledge that I had to give them, and it was a great time. But when you live this like double life of I'm coaching these kids, I have to be straight, I have to be on my stuff because these parents are watching me, and then you go home and you have to fall asleep in the same bed that your brother died in. You can't live those two different lives and be okay. And I was using pretty hard every night. I didn't want to be alive. The kids were the only reason why I was still going. And we did about a year and a half of that. And then I found out in June 2016, I was going to have a surgery on my colon. And they ran some tests, and it came back that through my drug use over the years, I had developed liver and kidney disease. And the doctor sat me down and told me, you got about 12 months to live if you continue to do what you're doing. And that was a shocker to me, but it was also this like out. I didn't know if I wanted to continue to live or not. I had nothing to live for other than those kids. And one of the questions that you had asked me was what was the point where you made the decision that this is what you wanted to do? What was your breaking point? And I will tell you that I won't get into details, but on the night of July 16th, 2016, I got to a point in my head that I felt like my only option was to end my own life. And when I got to that point, the thought process behind like watching my family at my brother's funeral, and coaching those kids and their parents having to tell them what my dad had to tell me about my brother, it got to be too much. And I made a decision that night that I was going to work my hardest to become the man that my brother thought that I was going to be, that he told me from day one that I was going to be. And I knew in my heart that it wasn't going to be easy. And I knew that I may fail. But I owed it to him, and I owed it to those kids that I would try my best before I left this place.
How are you able to do that? To walk yourself back from that, you get to that decision in your head that, man, I don't want to be here anymore. But you're able to walk yourself back from it with all this kind of positive talk that, you know what? Nope, I'm going to get the resolve. And that's kind of amazing that you were in one headspace and the way you came out of it was with that resolve to get clean and to, that.
So to me, the simple answer is that I grew up in sports, right? And I grew the 2 years prior to that, I'm teaching these kids like what you have to have mentally in order to succeed. And whenever a team is down 21 points going into the second half, do you give up then? You don't. You have to be the person that says, hey, like, you have to buckle down right now.
Right.
If not, you're going to lose by 42. But if you buckle down, you have a chance. You may not win, but you have a chance.
And you felt like you could give yourself a chance.
And that positive outlook of like, you know what? Never in my life have I been the one to like lay down and just give up. And I thought to myself that night, I have too many people behind me that are not like that have put so much time into my life that deserve this, that it wasn't about me anymore. It was about the fact that all these other people had never turned their back on me. And I wanted to show them that, like, I tried. I did my best, and it may not have worked in the end. And at that point, I drove home. I sat my parents down, and I said, I gotta check in. And they got me to Mountain Ridge again, and the same wonderful counselor that I had the 2 years prior to that. Her name's Arnie. She's amazing. She's like a second mom to me. We're almost 6 years in, and she talks to me at least 2 or 3 times a month still. She met me at the door and looked at me, and she's the most blunt person you'll ever meet. She's an older lady. She just looked me in the eye and she said, "You look like you almost died. Welcome back." And turned around and walked away. And I was like, okay. And they check me in. They get me into this room. And I'm laying in this room in full out withdrawal, just sick as a dog. And I hear a knock on the door, and it's her. And she's like, "Jake, are you in here?" And I didn't answer. I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't want to talk to anyone. And there's some walls so that she can't like actually see me. So I throw the covers over my head, and I'm deciding that hopefully she doesn't come look. I'm 28 years old at this time. Like, I'm acting like a child. And she walks over, and being who she is, she takes the covers and pulls them completely off me. And she goes, "Hey, so I've made a decision." And I said, "Okay, what's that decision?" And she said, "I don't think 30 days is ever going to work for you." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "So whenever we get done here, I'm going to send you to Prescott, Arizona. And we're going to send you to a 6-month treatment center." And me just wanting to get her out of my room so that I could just lay there, I was like, "Yeah, okay, that's fine. You can leave now." And she walked out. She said, "Okay, I'm going to hold you to that." And she walked out. By the time the next day, I had started to feel a little bit better, and I had left the room. Her and my family had got me into a place, had bought the plane tickets, and I was set. Like, at
That quick.
it was set in stone. There was no getting around it. And I thank her every day because doing that changed my life. 30 days was never going to work for me.
Just say it does, I don't know anything about, that side of things, but does 30 days, like you said earlier, 30 days just kind of get you clean, but it doesn't really change your lifestyle, does it?
So for me, and I've preached this since I started working in treatment, 30 days is just getting the toxins out of your body, just making you feel normal again. Your body has to recuperate from everything. The real work happens from that 2 to 6 month period where, like, you start talking about the trauma, the losing my brother, losing the girl, talking about losing my identity, that real trauma therapy work doesn't happen in the first 30 days.
The first 30 days is more just physical, and the long term is more the emotional side of how do you deal with not being an addict and being physically clean, but also emotionally being okay with that.
We call it emotional sobriety, learning how to deal with emotions and living your life through those emotions. So one of the things that really, when I got out to Prescott, it was just like a culture shock. First of all, when I think of Arizona, I think of the desert. So I packed thinking I wasn't going to need anything, like no coats or anything like that. I get out to Prescott, Arizona, and it's in the middle of the mountains. So I've got all these T-shirts, and I'm cold every single night. And so that was a culture shock. Being around, I went to a treatment center, and the vast majority of the guys that were there were from New Jersey, New York, Philadelphia, all these northeastern states. And so learning to deal with people that I had never dealt with, who, by the way, are very loud and obnoxious for our standards, learning how to deal with that, it was so different. But it brought me to this place where it felt like I was back on a team again. Like we were all working towards the same goal. We were all working towards like bettering our lives and learning how to deal with life on life's terms. And I sat in that treatment center for 7.5 months instead of 6. At 6 months, the clinical director gave me the option to stay another 1.5 months because she thought that I had enough stuff that I still needed to do, that I still needed to work through, that she was willing to put herself out there and keep the bed for me for another 1.5 months. And that was really huge for me. So we worked through that. The first things that we worked through while I was out there was the family relationships. At the time that I got help, I had destroyed the 3 family relationships that I had left. Dad had always been my best friend, and unfortunately, I had used him for 11 years. Mom and Ty were done. They had been done with my stuff for a long time, and I learned how to interact with them again. I learned how to realize that they may not trust me for years, but eventually it'll come back as long as I put in the work.
Was that hard to realize? Like when you want to make amends with your family, you get out after 7.5 months, or maybe that process begins while you're there. But do they warn you this isn't going to happen instantly? Like you're not just going to be able to go home and apologize and be like, all right, guys, let's have family dinner. Everything's back to normal. Is it?
They do warn you of that. They do talk to you about the fact that like you've caused this damage, right? And it is your job in this relationship to sit back and like take it on the chin. With my mother, it probably took a solid 3.5 to 4 years to the point where while I was back in Pratt, she trusted what I was doing. It wasn't that she was overbearing. She would call me and just ask, hey, where are you at?
Right.
And I knew what she was doing. But old Jake would have been like, listen, just leave me alone. I'm an adult. But I had been taught through therapy that you got to take it on the chin. Tell her exactly what you're doing. And know that like it's just she's concerned.
Right. You've put yourself in this place of distrust. Or,
Exactly.
You've earned it.
Yeah, exactly. That is 100% it. And we got to that point. And the cool thing is through my time I worked through the place that I went through. I worked my way up all the way through the company. I've worked on every side of a treatment center. I worked as a house manager, which is basically just the babysitter of all the clients, all the way to case manager. As a case manager, I worked with the court system, and I was the go-to for all the families. I got to call the families once a week just to give them an update on how their kid was doing, and then wrote letters to the court system to say, hey, like, he was a drug addict and he made these mistakes, but he's in treatment now. Can you work with this? I have seen kids that had 5 years over their head get put on probation, that they should have went to prison for 5 years. But because they put in the time in a treatment center, and then after the treatment center continued to do what they were doing, they were able to better their lives to the point where a judge said, you know what? You're right. This is a productive member of society, and I don't want to put them in a place like this. So, and then I worked admissions. I worked as a substance abuse counselor under a licensed counselor. So what I would do is I would do one-on-one sessions for an hour, 12 of them a week with 12 different clients. And in the state of Arizona, as long as I do an hour and a half a week with that licensed therapist and talk to them about like what we're going through so that they can guide me through my counseling, it's allowed. So I got to be on all those sides and eventually worked my way up to basically I was the man underneath the guy that ran all the housing, all the consequences, all that stuff. And it was a really cool thing to see. But what really has changed me is I started to really get involved in these clients' lives. And I will tell you that it is really hard to take. I've lost upwards of 50 clients to overdoses in the past 4 years. And each one of them hits a little bit different. But it taught me how to interact with people when they were at their lowest, how to make them see the positive in life, even when it felt like there was none to see. And that positive reinforcement and the changing of the thought process, that is something that I think that all people need to really take a look at. Is we live in this society today that you look at the college coaching atmosphere, right? If I don't win in 2 years, I get fired. That's not the way things work.
Yeah.
We look at this failure as like this huge negative at all times. And it has really progressed into our children at this point. If they're not good by a certain age, then it's like, hey, ditch that. We'll find something else for you. Why are we doing that? If you look at kids that hit puberty at like 6th grade, they're the best athlete on the team. But statistically, they usually lower, and then the kids that haven't get better and better and better and end up being better athletes.
Right.
But in today's society, we look at failure as this negative, and we look at it as like, you can't come back from it. That's complete crap. It is not real.
Right.
The true like process of life is the journey from that negative to the positive.
Right. Speaking on society, you mentioned earlier, kind of when we started about, when you were young and didn't know how to deal with that social anxiety, that was 20, 25. I do feel like there is a lot more awareness and openness to speak about mental health. And today than, 25 years ago, you probably had no idea, like, who do I talk to about this or what? There's nobody else on TV. There's no athletes talking about mental health. I do feel like today it is made a lot more aware, people a lot more open to talk about it. And I think that's a positive that it seems to be getting the light shined on it, much more. I follow Jay Glazer and like everything he does with, he just had his book come out, about, he always talks about the gray and, waking up with the gray and just his struggle with mental health. And you didn't see that 20 years ago with anybody talking about it.
No, you didn't see it at all. And I do think that we are getting better at it. I think that one thing that we can do better though with it is don't make it such a, I feel like you get stigmatized whenever you open up about it. And people begin to, like, if I was, one of the things that worried me about doing this podcast was putting myself out there to the point where now people see me as like, he's went through this and that's only
and
you're
you're a finished product.
Yeah, that's only what I am. When the truth is, like, yeah, it's a part of me, but who is it really just that? Am I really just that? No, I'm a human being that like has struggled in the past, but has changed his life around. And I feel like whenever we talk about mental health, we almost put too much focus on it whenever somebody opens up about it. Like if you look at with kids, young kids, you have young kids. When one of your kids fell whenever they were younger, and you said, "Are you all right?" They probably went to crying. But if you laughed about it and you were like, that had to hurt, they didn't cry.
Right.
Because I'm not calling all the attention towards like the pain that they should feel, but knowing that like, hey, that's a part of them. It's not a big deal. We can handle that. And asking the appropriate questions is a huge thing. I think that we, and that's one of the things that I really want to work on with kids is like learning how to ask the questions. And if you feel like you can't give the answer, like pointing them in the right direction. Because we as parents or teachers or whatever, we don't always have the answers. But there are people out there that do.
Right.
And pointing those kids in that direction is a huge thing.
Right. What I wanted to talk on, you talked about kind of that team aspect that you had back there in Arizona when you were there. What have you replicated that with coming back home once you got away from that? And again, speaking on, Jay Glaze, you see that a lot with veterans, that once that team atmosphere is important to them. And, you'll see a lot of them with mental struggles once they are removed from that. What have you done to, and for anybody who didn't know you before, you haven't always been this 6'2", 240, jacked guy. Was your exercise routine part of that recovery? I think I talking to you with it a couple of weeks ago. I'd asked you, did you kind of have to replace one habit or addiction with another, and it went from that to exercise with just that kind of addictive personality?
So it's been a huge part.
I think I threw like 2 or 3 questions at you there. So
it's been a huge part of my my recovery has been the exercise part of it. It has been going back to my roots, whatever those roots for a person are, whether it's I like to draw or something like that. Going back, finding those things that used to make you happy prior to your drug use. So today, my dad makes fun of me all the time, but I play competitive softball. And we won last March, we won the Clean and Sober World Championship in Las Vegas. I got into that really hard out in Arizona. I have a team now in Kansas that next weekend we're playing in Oklahoma City. The exercise part of like going to the gym, I found out really early on in my sobriety that I felt really accomplished every day that I went to the gym. And always striving, one of the things that like I feel like I really want people to understand whether you're an addict or a normal person, is always looking at the positive. So what I've always done is I've tried to, at the end of every night, try to figure out where I came up short, where I excelled at. And I felt like every time I went to the gym, my nightly review seemed to be a lot more positive. So I latched onto that, and I was like, you know what? If me working out consistently can keep my brain in a positive aspect, then that's something that I want to do. And it has transitioned into this thing where whether it's I go to the gym, play co-ed volleyball, I play softball, I play basketball. Not any good at volleyball or basketball, but I love it.
Right.
You know, like I love that interaction because for somebody that didn't like to talk to people or didn't know how to talk to people, it makes you have to talk to people that you don't know. It makes you have to go out of your way, and it brought me back to my roots of like I was an athlete and I want to feel that. So one of the things about exercise that we've figured out in the treatment community is for addicts, they are their own biggest critics, right? Me as a parent or as a coach or whatever I am, I can sit down with an addict or an alcoholic and I can say, hey, like you did this really well, you did this really well. And they can hear it. And as soon as you walk away, it goes out the other ear. Because in their head, they're like, that's not true. They're just trying to bring me up, all this stuff. And what they figured out is the one place that the one way that you can get an addict to stop denying progress is by putting it before their eyes.
Seeing physical progress.
Seeing it. So if I go to the gym and the first day, I can remember the first day going to the gym in treatment, I put up 115 pounds on bench press. And I walked away and I was like, I'm pathetic. Like, this is so sad. Like, I was doing this in 8th grade. And I'm sitting there, like, frustrated with myself. And I had to go the rest of the week. And by week number 3, I've got 145 pounds on the bench press. And as an addict, I look at it, and all of a sudden, I'm like, wait a second. I just went up 30 pounds in 2 weeks. I can't deny that. I can't. It's right before my eyes. I have progressed. And when they progress and they start to see it in the gym, that opens up this trend in their brain of like, okay, now I can recognize it outside of the gym. I talked to so-and-so, or I apologized for having an outburst to whoever. And in their nightly review, they're like, you know what? I actually did that right. I got better at that. Normally, I struggle with that. So we found that like this exercise aspect of it not only helps you like in your health, your physical health, it helps you in your mental health. Because all of a sudden I'm seeing positives and progress that I would have never saw had I not started it in the gym. So I've used that, and I'm wearing the place that I just got done working at. They were one of the first places in Arizona to start this. And they decided that they were going to start CrossFit, which I'm not a CrossFitter. It's cardio.
It's a bit of a cult,
yeah.
you know.
Cardio and lifting at the same time. That doesn't sound fun to me at all. So they started this, but they called it Recover Strong. And they made it a huge part of their program. Everybody that was physically capable of actually exercising and doing this stuff, they made them do it. It was a group. And if they had some difficulties or some physical problems, they would change the workout for that person so that they were still getting some exercise in And it really started to change the environment of the clients. It made them more happy during the day. At night, they weren't wild. They were tired, and they'd go to bed. And now the house manager doesn't have to worry about somebody running out.
Right.
And it really just changed the outlook. And when I got the chance to start the program at the place that I went through, I went for the just like lifting and doing that. And I still have people that were my clients that message me on Snapchat or Facebook Messenger and they're like, I just put up this. I'm like, dude, that is awesome. You couldn't do 10 pounds whenever I first met you. So like that's been a huge part of my recovery, and it has really, it's not, for me, it's not the physical attributes that get me. It's the fact that like when I leave the gym, I'm tired and I feel accomplished. I feel like, and it also has given me this place that I don't work out with other people unless they were clients. Like it's just not my thing. I like to sit in there. It's like my safe spot. I go over, the gym is the place where I set my goals for the next day, where I go over what I did today, what I need to do better tomorrow. And I set the little short-term goals for the next day or the next 2 days, what I need to get accomplished. And those build towards my long-term goals. What you are seeing right now, me being in Pratt, working here, was a long-term goal that was set 2.5 years ago.
Really?
Yeah. And it was, what do I need to do? How do I need to show up? And it was those little short-term goals that I set up in the gym that eventually got me to the point where when God finally started pointing everything in the direction of Pratt, Kansas, I was like, I'm ready. I can do this. And what brought me here was, I came back. My parents are getting old. Everything was kind of pointing towards Pratt, and I came back and visited, and I sat down with Larry Eisenhauer, who was always one of my biggest supporters while I was in Pratt before. I coached with him when we were coaching football, and I love the guy to death. And I called him, and I said, listen, I was on my way back. I was driving the 13 and a half hours back to Arizona. I said, listen, I think I'm ready. Like, parents are getting old. I want to set up the rest of my life. I want to work with kids. I want to have a change. Like, I want to affect a change in kids so that we can get to them before they get to the place that I'm currently at, And he said, okay. I said, can you keep your ear out for jobs that I would be able to live there with? And sure enough, within a week and a half, I was on the phone with Pratt High School, and they were saying, hey, we've got this position open. We'd like to have you here. And it was really cool to see because with everything that I've been through in life, after 5.5 years of like hard work every single day, everything built up, and it was this glorious like thought process of, if I think I'm ready and other people think I'm ready, you're ready, Jake. And to walk away, I just walked away from a job that like a lot of people would love to have, very well paying, and it wasn't for me. My heart wasn't in it anymore. And to be able to get the chance to come back here and just start building here, and trying to have a positive effect on the kids here. that's a huge thing for me. And we've gotten to that point. I try to show up on a daily basis wherever I go and be as positive as possible. My family comes to me whenever they're struggling to walk them through it. That's something that I never thought would ever happen.
Right. Is there a part of you that feels like you almost owe it to the town of Pratt to, for as much as, not that you took away anything from the town of Pratt, or, for your 10, 11 years of, in the dark there, you kind of feel like, man, if I could ever repay that, kind of put my time back into Pratt and be a positive aspect of it versus all my negative time that was associated with it.
That is 100% like I love this town. This is home. It always will be home. There are people out there that will say, I don't know, like all my friends in Arizona are like, why would you move back to a town of 6,000 people? Because it's home. I love small towns. I love this place with all my heart. And just because I made mistakes while I lived here doesn't mean that like it was anything about this town that caused that. It was my own mistakes. And I felt like having somebody here like me could give back to a place that like deserves it. This town is a wonderful, wonderful town, and it has a lot of good kids and a lot of good families in it. And I think that, that's a huge part of it. I want to give back.
That's awesome.
I love the fact that I get to show up on a daily basis and work with the kids. We just had a homecoming ceremony, and one of the questions to one of the candidates was, if there was a zombie apocalypse, what teacher would you save and why? And the answer was Mr. Eisenhauer, because he would try to talk to him and tell him there's a different way.
Oh, that's cool. I know my daughter, Ryan, she's a freshman. I said I was, heading down here to do this podcast. She was like, oh, he's awesome. I was like, that's cool. And it's cool. I'll wrap it up with you here, Jake, but it's cool for me. I'm proud of you, for how far you've come, because I didn't know you real well. I was always buddies with Judd and, and Ty, and you were the younger brother. But, I'd see you 5-10 years ago, and it was just like, God, I saw Jake at Love's, and he didn't look good. Yeah. It's like, when is that kid going to get his shit together?
Yeah.
And so to now see you, gotten your stuff together back here in Pratt, giving back, the way you're doing. Man, I wish you the best of luck with everything, because I know you're not a finished product. It's a day-to-day grind, I'm sure. But yeah, just want to tell you, man, I'm proud of what you've done and, what you overcome and where you're at with things today. And just happy that you, sat down and chatted with me about all this. And, I think a lot of people probably feel the same way.
Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the support. There's a lot still to come. Like you said, I'm not a finished product. It's only going to get better. I know that I'm where I need to be. But I also wanted to say there are a lot of people in this town that, despite my flaws, have welcomed me back with open arms. And that's a wonderful thing to feel, to know that you've made mistakes in your past, and they're willing to look past them and see the man that you've become today. And I just want to say thank you to you and all those other people that have been there for me. So,
well, you've earned it, and I think that's a good place to end. So We'll wrap it up. Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.